If you don't know how to implement DORA, then this video is for you. So I'll show you how to divide this implementation project in 4 phases, and I'll also show you the detailed 18 steps that are part of these 4 phases of the compliance with this EU cybersecurity regulation. And I'll also show you a couple of documents that you can use for compliance. So after watching this video, you'll have a clear idea on how to start your project and how actually to make your financial entity fully compliant with DORA. And I made this video for CISOs, project managers, chief technology officers, consultants, so anyone who is working with DORA compliance in financial entities. In general, you can divide your project in 4 phases. The first one is a preparation phase, where you actually do all the activities that are needed for your project to be successful before you actually start your real implementation. The second phase is about risk management and decision making, and this is where you analyze your existing situation in your financial entity and then make decisions on which kind of cybersecurity and resilience measures you have to implement, how you intend to document them, and so on. And then in the third phase, you actually start with the implementation. This is the longest phase, and this is where you have to implement all of these planned cybersecurity and resilience measures alongside of all the other incident reporting, third-party risk management, and so on, and other measures. And then the fourth phase is basically where you set up your system that you can maintain and improve it continuously. This is where you define how you'll measure, report, do the audits, and so on. So let's start with this preparation phase. So the first step is really to do a gap analysis so that you can see actually how far is your financial entity from full compliance with the DORA and related CDRs. And this gap analysis will show you exactly how big the gaps are and how much work you need actually to do as part of your project, so it will give you a clear idea of the scope of the project. And then the next step is to get the support of your senior management, and this support means that you will have enough time and money and human resources actually to run your project. And then the third step is to set up a formal project management, which means that you have to define who is the project manager, who is the project sponsor, so the person from the senior management to oversee and support the project. Also, who is the project team, how you report the progress of the project, what are the milestones, and so on. And on the screen now you can actually see an example of such a project plan for a DORA project. And then as a final step in this preparatory phase is that you do initial training. And you should do this initial training for your project team, but also for the senior management about the DORA requirements, so that everyone in the team and in the senior management is aware of actually what needs to be done as a part of the project. In this second phase of decision making and risk management, you basically start with this step where you define the top level governance, so where you define the policies which specify what are the roles of the senior management, what is the role of the middle management, what are the key documents that need to be used as part of your DORA implementation, what are the key goals that you want to achieve, how does the reporting work, and so on. So basically these are the things that are defined in these top level policies. Usually this is defined in the top level information security policy and top level business continuity policy. And then in the next step you define policies on how you're going to list all of your assets and how you relate them to your processes within your financial entity, but also how you perform the risk assessments and treatments for all of your assets according to the significance that they have for your processes. And this can be done through asset management procedure and also risk management methodology. And then the next step is actually to implement all of these policies, meaning that you actually have to identify all of these assets, and then you have to assess all of these risks, and you have to create these registers of risks, but also registers of your assets. And then as the last step in this decision-making phase, you have to create this digital operational resilience strategy. And basically this is a document which uses all of this information that you created before and define a plan on how you're going to implement all of these measures within your financial entity, taking into account your specific, let's say, architecture, your specific risk profile, your specific assets and processes, and so on. And this is where the third phase, implementation phase, begins. And the first step is really to implement all of these cybersecurity measures. And this means writing various policies and procedures for cybersecurity, including password policy, access control policy, encryption policy, and so on. Of course, course, once you write all of these policies, then you have to make sure that everyone in your financial entity is really complying with all of these policies and procedures that you're writing. Then the next step is to implement all of these resilience measures, which basically means that you have to implement all of these business continuity measures. And these include a crisis management plan, business continuity plan, disaster recovery plan, and so on and so forth. And then the next step is for you to define how you're going to manage ICT third-party risk. In other words, how are you going to manage IT suppliers. And this is typically done through supplier security policy, where you define rules on how you define security requirements for these IT suppliers, and also how you also assess these suppliers, how you do your due diligence, how you create these security clauses, how you monitor these suppliers, and also how you exit these contracts if needed. The next step is also to set up this continuous training and awareness, not only about DORA, but also about all these policies and procedures that you have written, so that your employees will not only understand why they are needed, this is basically awareness, but also how they need to use those new rules in your financial entity, and basically this is training. And not only this, according to DORA, you also have to organize training and awareness for your ICT suppliers, so you should also include them in your program. And then the next step is to define this incident and threat reporting and classification. Typically this is done through incident handling policy, where you define rules on how the incidents are reported internally, how then they are classified, how then they are reported externally towards authorities if this is a significant incident, how to handle, of course, all of these incidents, how to handle threats, and so on. And then you can start with this fourth phase, where you define how you're going to maintain your system, how you're going to improve it. And there you start with the step of defining this digital operational resilience testing, which requires you to use various methods to test out in realistic situations if your cybersecurity and business continuity really works. And for that purpose, you'll need to use various assessments, tools, but also threat-led penetration testing. And to define all of these things, you will typically write the digital operational resilience testing policy. And then the next step is to define how you're going to measure and monitor and review everything that is happening with your cybersecurity, business continuity, and all of the other things that you have defined according to DORA. And this is where you actually start to measure against your KPIs how you're doing. This is where you start to monitor if all of your systems are performing as expected, and you'll start doing these regular reviews to make sure that everything is fine. And the next step is to start doing these internal audits. So basically you need to have an independent person who will actually go through everything that you have implemented so far and make sure that your financial entity is fully compliant, not only with your internal documentation, but also with all the requirements from DORA and from Commission delegated regulations and other technical regulatory standards. And of course, as part of these internal audits, the internal auditor will have to produce reports that will be presented towards the senior management. So the next step is really to define how these regular management reviews will be performed, because you need to inform your senior management about all the crucial information about your cybersecurity and resilience in the company, not only through these internal audit reports, but also through other reports that are relevant for this senior level. And it's very useful to create this procedure for management review, where you specify in very detail on what are all the information that needs to be presented, and then what the senior management needs to decide upon this information. And then of course, as the last step, you have to perform these follow-up actions, corrective actions. So everything that is not doing right, you actually need to have a systematic process of fixing these things, of eliminating the root causes which actually caused these problems in the first place, so that once you eliminate these root causes, these problems or non-conformities do not recur. And of course, all of these steps that I mentioned as part of this last maintenance and improvement phase, they're not one-off steps. These are the steps that you have to do continuously if you want your whole system to work and continuously improve. Okay, hope this was helpful. And if you want to see these documents that I was showing you, these were documents from Advisera's DORA documentation toolkit. You can click this link in the description below, and you'll be able to sign up for a free trial of this toolkit, and you'll be able to download the demo versions of these documents. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and you can also subscribe to my channel if you want not to miss any of my new videos, and I publish videos every week. Thanks for watching.